Good morning to everyone. So today's presentation is going to be on understanding the publishing process. And I think before I start, I just also would want to thank the College of Graduate Studies School of Interdisciplinary Research for inviting me to give this presentation. So so basically you'll see that we've broken down this presentation into two. But today we're just going to focus on, the process that one goes through before they draft, or write their articles from their dissertations. And I've decided to, break down this workshop into two sessions because we always forget about, the small but very important things, that lead us to having successful articles, with our supervisors. So before I go into today's presentation, I just want to share the presentation outline so that we know what we're going to achieve today. So after today's workshop, we should be able to understand the process of publishing from our master's or PhD thesis. And then we should also be able to contract with our supervisors. And that is, if, some of us have not, had contracted, with our supervisors yet. And then we should also be able to plan, our research. And then we should also start thinking about, the conversations we want to have with our peers. And lastly, we also need to understand, the journals that we want to publish in. So you may be asking yourself, to say, but, Fortunate, you're saying that I should publish, from my master's or, dissertation, but what does it entail? So I think before we even, go into, the importance of publishing, we just also need to understand, what it entails, publishing from, one's master's or PhD thesis. So first, when you look at, the history of publishing, you realize that, with the STEM discipline, it has been normal for them, for postgraduate students to publish from their, masters or dissertations. And in most cases, they would even publish, it would be several authors that, that publish together. However, when you look at it from, the humanities or social sciences discipline, you realize that this is fairly a new phenomenon, and I think that is why we need to have such conversations, amongst ourselves, so that we understand the importance, of publishing from our dissertations and thesis. So and one of the reasons why it's now becoming important for students to publish while they're busy with their dissertations or thesis, it's because the world of work is changing. You would note that when you look at job adverts, especially in universities, they would highlight the requirement of at least one or two publications. And when one wants to even pursue a postdoc position, a publication record is a requirement. So there they we do not even compromise when one wants to be a postdoc in our institutions. So the big question that you may also be asking yourself as well would be, okay, now I understand things are changing, but why? Why is it important for me to publish? What is it in it for me? And you will note that through publication or research, we're able to disseminate our research findings to others in our disciplines. And this also makes it easier, for researchers or even practitioners, who've got the same interest in this in your research area, to be aware of the new knowledge in their field, and that also helps to advance knowledge and its application. And when you look back also, into your undergrad or your honors, you may also realize that, when we're still at undergrad honors, we're like consumers of knowledge. But now, that we're at, master's and PhD level, we have that opportunity to contribute to new knowledge through our research findings. So you can imagine, also, the impact of, the initiatives in your communities. When I talk about communities, I'm not only talking about, the places where we live. We can have, the LGBTI communities. Students are also communities. So yeah, you can just think of your community, the communities or your research and the type of people that it makes a contribution to, and that is your community. So when you think about that community and the initiatives, you would realize that in most cases, most initiatives that are implemented, they're implemented based on research. So imagine if you have your paper and it is published, and then I come across it, we're in the same research field. I look at your recommendations, I'm like, these are key, and then I recommend them. Imagine the impact of your research. And I also don't know about you, but maybe if you can also consider this as well. Um, I always ask my students, about the changes they envisage, seeing in their, communities through their research. And I mean, this is because we come from, different communities, and, deep down in our hearts, there's always that one aspect that we wish, we can change. So uh, think about it if you haven't thought about it, to say, but what is it that I would want to change? And consider also, publishing, from your PhD or your master's, as a contribution to that new knowledge. And sometimes you can even, some make those changes as well, depending on, the field that you find yourself in. So now that, we are aware, of what it entails to publish, from our dissertations and thesis, and why it is important to publish, from our dissertations and thesis. I just want us to look at the second small aspect, but it's also important, that contributes to a successful publication. And this entails contracting with our supervisors. So in summary, when you look at contracting with supervisors, this is the process, of that entails having an agreement with your supervisor about, submitting drafts of, proposals and chapters. And of course, the supervisor also commits to providing you with timeous feedback, among, other, ways that they're going to support you during the supervision process. However, now that we have this new requirement, of publishing from our dissertations and thesis, I would recommend that, you build it into your contract with your supervisor. And this will help you understand, when you will start working on your articles. And of course, different supervisors have got different arrangements with their students. You will notice, when you engage with your other peers, that, the way your supervisors provide you with support is different. So I'll give an example about, myself, for example. When I published from my master's and thesis, and PhD thesis, I you know worked on my articles after I finished, that whole process, after I submitted, for examination. However, with my students, I have, different arrangements, and this is because they also have got different, preferences. For example, one of my students, after they submitted their, PhD thesis and also the masters, they published, from their from their master's dissertation and PhD thesis. However, I've got another student, who's got a different arrangement with me. So basically, every time she sends, her, dissertations or chapters. So when I'm busy working on them, she's busy conceptualizing, you know, um, the article that, she'll be submitting. So the second approach, there's nothing wrong with it, and I think it also works because one is always reading and abreast with what is happening in their field. And I just want to use also this opportunity as we talk about reading, to encourage you to always read. Even if your supervisor takes longer than expected to give you feedback. And this is because through reading, we're able to, grow in our research areas. I remember when I was doing my master's and PhD, it was through reading that I learned that the research I was doing was not completely new. There were other authors who already started doing something something similar to my research, although with them they were using different research methods and also use different constructs to help them understand the research questions I had as well. So this process also helped me to understand how my research contributes to new knowledge and also to identify the gaps in the already existing literature, and how my literature is also my research is also different from what is already available. So I just want to encourage you to always read, and this is something that you could also commit to in your contract with your supervisor. So then the next aspect entails planning your research. So planning your research can make all the difference in the outcome of your research project. And this is because your research plan will help you to identify and define your goals, and then you'll be able to understand the research methods that you're going to use to answer your research questions. And then it will also outline how you're going to do your research when you start and until you finish. So I also want to remind you as well to just also discuss this research plan with your supervisor. So it is very important for you to discuss this research plan with your supervisor so that you're on the same page and you've got the same goals. And in your discussion also with your supervisor, I think one thing that you could also consider is, which chapters, would you use, or would you use when you want to write, an article? And also which journal, should you also submit your papers to or articles to? And how much time, would you need, to write this article or articles for those who are doing, their PhDs? And then you use that plan to start planning, writing your, one article after another. And I think what you also need to remember as well is that the research plan is not cast in stone. Life can happen, whether, to the supervisor or to also, the student. There may be delays here and there. However, what is important is to have a discussion with your supervisor about these delays and also to adjust your research plan where necessary. So the next aspect entails thinking about the conversation you want to have with your peers. So, when you look at this section, it's related to, contracting and also planning, and this is because the sooner you contract with your supervisor and plan your research, then it will also be easier for you to be reminded about, the article and the conversations you want to have with your peers. So when you look at, the conversations that you want to have with your peers, they start by, when you read articles. Remember, you before you even start, with your different sections, you're going to read different articles and really understand the core of, your research topic at first, and when also, some of your research questions, the gaps in the literature. So I want to encourage you not to use, that process when you read your articles. Don't only think of, whether your articles are useful for your dissertation or thesis, but also look at the articles that you read from a different perspective. You could look at the journal, and then also the conversations, of that, authors have in that journal, and use it to structure, your article, should you want to contribute to the, conversation of that journal. And then you'll note as well that, your dissertation and thesis form part of this conversation. And you may be asking yourself, say, but how? This is because, when you look at, your master's or dissertation or PhD thesis, they make contributions to, any field, although even when you look at it from an article's perspective, although they're a bit thicker compared to when you make a contribution, in the form of an article, which is, thinner. So basically, when you draft now, that your article, think of your dissertation, but do it in a way that is a mini version of your dissertation or thesis. And some of the questions that you also need to ask yourself, when you're also reading these articles to help you contribute to this conversation is, how do these articles that I'm reading from this journal look like? And then you'll see that, all of them, they've, the outline is the same. When it comes to, referencing, for example, if they use Harvard, referencing system, all of them use that, referencing system. And then you also ask yourself to say, but what attention, do writers in this journal give, to different sections of the article? You'll find that, for example, the introduction, in some journals, the introduction is, broad, or sometimes not even that broad, or the literature review is, a bit, broad, and in other journals it may not be. So these are things that you start looking at, but at the same time, you also need to start asking yourself to say, but what are the things, or sections that I may have in my dissertation that, are included or not included, and you ask yourself why. So that will help you also when you structure your article. And also, when you also ask yourself these questions, this will also help you outline, the draft article. You'll be able to, isolate it, to a manageable size. You create an, coherent argument. And of course, you also, target the journal readership. And also, this will help you to also contribute to the, conversation of that journal. And of course, remember, when you also, asking yourself these questions as well, this will also help you to also, change the writing conversions from what you used in your master's dissertation or also, PhD thesis. So these are things that you just need to, consider when you're reading, your articles. So the final aspect, to consider, to have a successful, article with a supervisor is to, understand the journal you want to publish in. The first thing that you need to do is to read, the instructions from the journal, and this will help you understand what is expected of you, so that your article is not rejected. And then also, when you understand the focus of the journal, this will help you to submit your article to a relevant journal, and you'll be able to have that conversation that you're supposed to have with your peers. And also, when you need to also understand whether the journal, publishes, whether it's systematic reviews or qualitative or quantitative or mixed methods research papers. So this understanding is mainly looking at the focus now. It's when you understand the focus of the journal, and also the articles that are published in the journal. This will help you to get your paper published, and it will avoid a situation whereby you are disappointed and your paper is rejected, or you're asked, to by the editor to submit your article to another journal. And of course, draft the article according to the journal's formatting and style guidelines. So journals, insist on formatting and, style guidelines. And this is because they have a certain look and feel as well as, readership. So, they would wish to keep, engaging this audience by continually presenting their content in that manner. So always, make sure that you adhere to the style. Even if, I know that for some of us, who are in this in the social sciences, we're used to APA, for example. So you may publish your paper in a journal that uses Harvard. So you cannot use APA referencing, when the journal, requires you to use, Harvard. And then also, you also need to, just consider, like, for example, that, when you also don't read, this this instructions, for example, your time would have been lost. You would have to also, submit your paper in another journal. So also just think about, the time that you would save by, reading, the what is required, and also drafting the article according to the journal's formatting and style guidelines. And then I also want to remind you as well to say that, drafting, the article is a work in progress. And I think I use the word drafting because I feel that, when you start talking about writing, it can invoke a lot of anxiety to, a lot of us, because we may feel that, okay, so now this is like, the final process. But when you're drafting it, it means that you still get feedback. It can be from your supervisors, it can also be from your peers, until, you feel ready to submit your article. So yeah, so also when you consider, writing as a work in progress, this will also help lessen your anxieties. So another thing also to help lessen your anxieties is to also to think about, the shape of the article and how, it links with, or it's related to dissertations or thesis. I mentioned, briefly that, the article is an extension of a dissertation or a thesis. So and I also mentioned that it's also because, the article is a thinner version of, the dissertation or thesis. So it's very important, for you to, make, this article thinner. And most of the things that you may consider is, to, for example, look at, the dissertation, to say that, a dissertation or thesis may investigate, for example, 5 constructs, but an article can focus on 1 or 2 constructs. And then you can also look at it also from another perspective, to say that, a thesis may, focus on a literature review or research methods chapter. And then an article can now focus on, a systematic, review. And that is how you can, make this distinction, but still, make that, that show, make that relationship between the dissertation or, thesis and the article. So, colleagues, we've come to the end of our presentation.